Hi, PerspectiveWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday, October 1st, the beginning of a new month here, and it's not far from now that we'll be putting out a winter outlook for the 2020-2021 winter season. And I want to talk a little bit up front here about some of the factors that I'll really be focused on over the next several weeks in preparation for a winter outlook. One of them has to do with sea surface temperatures, and that is how we'll begin the video discussion here. The main area of interest is along the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean, where there is no doubt La Nina, colder than normal conditions, have developed. It looks like La Nina will continue right through the winter season. That'll be an important factor for the winter weather across the United States. And here is the current sea surface temperature anomaly chart here. Right in here are the darker blues here, which represent colder than normal conditions associated with La Nina. This is the equator right along this horizontal line right here, the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean. And again, all indications are that this type of sea surface temperature pattern in the Pacific Ocean will continue right through the upcoming winter season. It has had an effect on the tropical season in that it has acted to kind of suppress activity in at least part of the Pacific Ocean, and in a kind of an interesting way, it actually generally leads to more activity in the Atlantic tropical basin, because it tends to lead to lower wind shear than normal in the tropical Atlantic, and indeed we have had an above normal season in the Atlantic, but far below normal in the world's largest ocean, the Pacific Ocean. Another area of interest, this area, warmer than normal conditions along over the northeastern part of the Pacific Ocean. We'll kind of monitor that as well. And in the Atlantic, a lot of near normal conditions right now in terms of sea surface temperatures. There's a pocket of warmer than normal off of some of the Canadian maritime provinces, but generally lots of near normal conditions in the Atlantic Ocean. But La Nina may be quite an important factor for the upcoming winter season. Well, another factor I like to kind of focus in on this time of the year has to do with the buildup of snow cover. There are some studies and even some empirical observations that show that the increase in snow cover, even across the North Pole over places like Siberia, can have an impact on the chances for cold air outbreaks into the central and eastern U.S., and specifically in this part of Asia. The Siberian part here of Asia on the other side of the pole is where some studies have shown that an increase in snowpack, a significant increase in snowpack during the month of October, tends to result in some higher probability for cold air outbreaks to make it into the central and eastern U.S. across the North Pole. And it tends to make sense. It's a kind of a common sense thing that the greater the snowpack buildup throughout the northern hemisphere in the fall season will generally lead to much more in the way of cold air masses that will form, and then you need the right upper level wind pattern to bring them into your particular neck of the woods, either the central or eastern U.S. for example. So certainly no guarantee, but the buildup of snow in Siberia is another thing that I like to focus in on during this time of the year. And in fact, just in the last few days we've had some significant snow building up in the north central part of Siberia, and again we'll follow that over the next few weeks here. This is Greenland, almost completely covered, if not completely covered right now, by snow. Well, there are also a couple of teleconnection indices I like to look at more closely during the winter season, even this time of the year, to see what the trend is going into the winter season. They're associated with the pressure and temperature pattern in the Arctic region, and known as the North Atlantic Oscillation, or the NAO, and the Arctic Oscillation, the AO, kind of closely related cousins, if you will. And we will certainly talk about these particular teleconnection indices over the upcoming winter season. A teleconnection is kind of a fancy word that basically means what happens in one part of the world can have an impact on another part of the world. In this particular case, what happens in the North Atlantic can certainly have an impact on cold air outbreaks or the possibility of cold air outbreaks into the central and eastern U.S. in general. When the AO, Arctic Oscillation, and NAO are in negative territory for a sustained period of time, tends to be correlated with more sustained cold air outbreaks into the central and eastern U.S. Cold air, again, will build up over snowpack regions of the northern hemisphere over the next several weeks, and whether or not they can come from Canada into the central and eastern U.S. partly can be told by what's going on in the North Atlantic, and that's where these teleconnection indices can play a role, at least in signaling the possibility of cold air outbreaks to make it into the central and eastern U.S. And if they will last for a while, anybody who knows, who is interested in snowstorms in the I-95 corridor region of the Mid-Atlantic knows it takes a lot to get a snowstorm in places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. One of the requirements is cold air, of course, but it's not only cold air, it's sustained cold air. You have to have a mechanism to keep cold air in place. Otherwise, a coastal low, maybe a snow changing to rain scenario, at least in the urban areas and to the coast. With AO and NAO in a negative territory for a sustained period of time, that increases the chance for a sustained cold air outbreak, and that increases the chance in turn for possible snow accumulation, at least in the I-95 corridor region. You may not need it as much up in the mountains of interior northeast U.S. Well, here is the current NAO as indicated by the black. This horizontal line separates the positive values above it to the negative values below it. Slightly negative in the forecast for the next couple of weeks, shown in red here. Generally a neutral to a negative signal for the next couple of weeks. Kind of a slight signal for cold air outbreaks to make it into the central and eastern U.S. over the next couple of weeks. And again, we'll monitor the trend here during the month of October as we go into the winter season. And here's the closely related cousin, the Arctic Oscillation, right around neutral right now here, shown in black. But the forecast is generally in negative territory over the next couple of weeks here for the Arctic Oscillation. So right now, both of these indices are tending to favor the possibility of additional cold air outbreaks into the central and eastern U.S., at least over the next couple of weeks. We have a chilly air mass coming from the Great Lakes into the northeast U.S., by tomorrow with the passage of another cold frontal system in the overnight hours, and it'll be chilly Friday, Saturday, and Sunday throughout the northeast, the mid-Atlantic, and the Great Lakes, definitely below normal. And this kind of a signal here from the teleconnection indices of the AO and NAO suggests it could be additional cold air outbreaks during the month of October. In fact, let's just take a look right now at the forecast map from the operational run of the GFS last night at 6Z for the 850 millibar temperature anomalies to give us an idea of the possibility of cold air outbreaks into the central and eastern U.S. Again, we just saw the signal for the NAO and the AO fairly positive for more cold air outbreaks. This is the initial one that arrives late tonight and early on Friday in the I-95 corridor region, already have an impact across the northern plains and the Great Lakes region. There'll be another cold frontal system, maybe with some showers later on tonight. Places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, and definitely below normal temperatures Friday afternoon, Friday night, and all weekend long throughout much of the eastern half of the nation. Let's now push forward here, and we'll see that cold air outbreak expand south and east over the next 12 to 24 hours or so. This is the Friday afternoon forecast map. By the way, while the central and eastern states chill down, the west remains hot, above normal, dry. Unfortunately, that raises the already high threat for wildfires in California and throughout much of the western U.S. And the bad news is it looks hot and dry for the next couple of weeks. So this pattern does not change anytime too quickly for the folks out in the west. And again, there will be a wildfire threat on the rise over the next couple of weeks, probably through at least the first half of the month of October. Let's now push forward here. And this cold air mass, once it arrives in the mid-Atlantic region, kind of sticks around here for several days. Here we are now into Monday morning, still below normal conditions in the Great Lakes, the Northeast, all the way down in the South Central, and still above normal throughout much of the western half of the nation. This kind of dichotomy across the nation with hotter than normal out west, colder than normal in the east, sticks around for several days here. And let's now move forward here. And again, we talked about the likelihood of additional cold air outbreaks, and here we go as we go through later next week. Here we are now, October 8th time frame, a week from today, and yet another cold air outbreak for the Great Lakes, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Northeast U.S., and that goes all the way down. This is a pretty impressive look to it. Again, continuation of warmer than normal out in much of the western half of the nation. This is a week from tomorrow, and pretty similar pattern to what we'll see this Friday. This is the forecast map for next Friday, October 9th. And again, the AO and NAO gave us a signal that there could be additional cold air outbreaks over the next couple of weeks. Well, let's wrap up with the surface forecast maps from the operational run of the GFS. And one of the things I haven't mentioned so far is the tropical scene. There are a couple of waves now, one in the Caribbean and one about to enter into the Caribbean area. And yesterday we talked about the likelihood for homegrown, what I call homegrown tropical systems this time of the year. As you get into the latter stages of the Atlantic tropical season, namely October, even into November, more likely to get systems that form over the still warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean Sea, maybe the southwestern Atlantic, as opposed to the tropical wave that comes off of the African west coast and then treks all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. It still can happen, but that's more of a first half of the tropical season type of phenomenon, whereas the latter stages I tend to note more homegrown type systems. Indeed, there's one right now over the Caribbean Sea. It very well could spill out over into the Gulf of Mexico over the next several days after it passes over or very close to the Yucatan Peninsula region of Mexico. We'll even see that on the GFS forecast maps. Rain-free starting off the day here in the I-95 corridor and much of the eastern U.S. Comfortable temperatures, by the way, for another day here. And then we have a cold frontal system that arrives late tonight right along the I-95 corridor region. This is the forecast map for about midnight, 1 a.m. Some showers will break out right along that next cold frontal system that arrives late tonight, and there'll even be low pressure trying to form along this frontal boundary zone. So this area may actually expand a little bit in the overnight hours. This is a low pressure starting to form near that frontal boundary zone. A weak low pressure, but it can enhance the shower activity. So expect showers to form after a nice day today. Expect showers to form, especially after midnight tonight, from D.C. to Philadelphia to New York City. And that's all associated with a second cold frontal system. We had the first one a couple of nights ago, and this will usher in a chilly air mass for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday into the Mid-Atlantic region. It kicks on out of here by tomorrow afternoon, and that's when high pressure takes control, Canadian high pressure, and a chilly air mass for the early part of October. Certainly lows will go all the way down into the 40s, maybe even the 30s in some suburban locations. Friday night, Saturday night, even into Sunday night. Highs generally confined to the 60s, and they should be in the 70s this time of the year. Way down here near the Yucatan Peninsula region, this is the forecast map for tomorrow night, Friday night, and this is a reflection of that tropical wave, again, now over the Caribbean Sea, where the sea surface temperatures are still quite warm. It should survive its passage over the Yucatan or near the Yucatan, and that's a little bit concerning because we'll see here it spills out over to the Gulf of Mexico by the time we get to the middle or latter stages of the upcoming week, and high pressure still in control of the Mid-Atlantic region. Cooler than normal air mass here, and then we'll keep our eyes focused on the Gulf of Mexico by the time we get to the early part of next week. High pressure extends from the northern plains, the upper Midwest, all the way to the Northeast, and we've often talked about whenever there's high pressure to the north this time of the year, that tends to open the door for tropical activity to cut underneath the ridge. And again, high pressure extending from the upper Midwest all the way to the Northeast coastline. And underneath, you can get these tropical systems that travel maybe from the east to the west through the Gulf of Mexico. And this is something we'll keep an eye on during the early part of next week. Let's go out a little bit farther in time, and here we go all the way to Monday of next week. There will be another low pressure system trying to form along the eastern seaboard in the Sunday night, Monday time frame. So after a nice weekend in the northeast and mid-Atlantic region with comfortably cool conditions, there may be more shower activity later Sunday night into the day on Monday. At the same time, that tropical system will kind of spin around over the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. Again, this is the Monday morning forecast map, so we'll keep an eye on that homegrown type system. And again, a chilly air mass coming to D.C., Philadelphia, New York City for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we'll get to that winter outlook over the next few weeks. We just looked at some of the factors that we'll be monitoring over the next couple of weeks. The sea surface temperature pattern, especially over the most important ocean, the Pacific Ocean, teleconnection indices such as the AO and NAO, and the all-important snowpack, the snow buildup in the fall season, especially in the northern hemisphere and even across the pole over places like Siberia in coming weeks. That's it for now. For PerspectiveWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.